Welcome, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. Very much appreciated. This is the first time in pre-COVID since we've done an in-person presentation here in Burlington. So super excited to have everybody out. It's been too long, as they say. So thanks for coming. Just a couple housekeeping items right off the bat. I do want to take a moment to introduce everybody on the team because the team they're seen a lot of change over the past few years, and with everybody not coming into the office as much, there's some new faces for everybody. So most of you know me, but Josh, I work in our Burlington office here. Uh, my colleague and partner, Colin White, most of you would see the familiar face as well. Along the back here, if we go left to right, we have Steve on the left there. Steve works in our Burlington office. He's an advisor there. Steve and I go back further than anybody else in this room, actually. We've been working together for 12 years? 10 plus. So anyway, it's been a great, both a personal and a working relationship with Steve over the years. New addition to the team. She's been here for 2 weeks now. Deandra. Deandra works in our Burlington office, and she'll be helping us out with a number of wealth-related things, financial planning, and eventually building into the role of portfolio manager as well. Next to Deandra, we have Arlene. Arlene has been with us for about a year, working in our Burlington office on the administrative side, doing an awesome job so far and bringing a lot of character to the office, we'll say. Mitch to the right there. Mitch works out of our offices in Etobicoke and Aurora, and he has brought financial planning expertise, also mortgage expertise to the team as well, and an investment background also. Raj to the right there. Wasn't sure I was missing anybody beside the pillar there, but Raj, her and Arlene make an amazing tag team in the office there, working on administrative things in Burlington. And then to Raj's right, or to Raj's left, on your right, we have Dylan. Dylan works out of our Etobicoke and Aurora offices as well, portfolio manager and partner in the business. So we're happy to have everybody here today, and hope you get a chance to meet them a little bit more throughout the day. So there's a lot to talk about today, as I'm sure you know. Not only are things kind of a little bit wonky in the world, but we have a new business name, Verecan, and what does that mean for you? So we'll be taking you through both of those things. We took sort of the approach of a movie theme today. So that's why you got the popcorn there in front of you, and you'll see some of the movie themes play out throughout the presentation here. So I'll be taking some time to walk through sort of a state of the world at the moment as we see it, highlight some of the things that we think are important to you. But then I'll pass it over to Colin to give you a bit of an idea of what is Verecan and why. More importantly, why is Verecan? What is the impetus behind the business? We'll do some Q&A towards the end, but definitely feel free to jump in throughout. It's a lot more enjoyable and engaging for us when we have questions from the audience, and probably a lot more relevant for you when you're asking the things that are important to you. So don't hesitate to ask questions at any point throughout. You can raise your hand or just throw your fork at me or something, whatever works for you, fine by me. And we'll have a guest speaker today, our friend Chuck Guerra as well, that will talk about a bit of a fundraiser that him and his lovely wife are doing. So we'll look forward to hearing from them as well. So before we get into anything, I just want to ask the question, are you okay? Is everybody doing okay? Because the markets over the past couple months have been on a little bit of a ride, and they will do this from time to time. Maybe a little bit more often than from time to time, but the last couple months have been, I was looking for the right adjective. I was like dismal, yeah, not quite dismal, dim, nah, I don't want to say dark, I don't want to say rough, but uncomfortable. I think we can all say that they've been uncomfortable the past couple months, and this is the tune of that discomfort. So Canadian stocks down about 7% over the past couple months. Yeah, that's noticeable. You're starting to notice it on your statement. You're starting to ask if we're doing our jobs and things like that. And I assure you we are. We're all working really hard. Maybe more so than the Canadian stock market being down. The bond market's down about 5% over the past couple months. Stocks will do this, pretty regularly. Bonds, not quite as much. It's pretty rare for bonds to be down 5% over 2 months. In fact, I can count on one hand the times that stocks and bonds have been both negative in the same calendar year, like we had last year, over the last 50 years. So it's a pretty, usually one of those two is doing okay, and right now they're both not doing so good. So that's uncomfortable. So if you need a hug, I'm a pretty good hugger. Let me know. If you just need someone to talk to, that's what we're here for as well. Colin likes my hugs. He does. Yeah, as much as he says, he likes them. Okay, so any financial conversation these days kind of needs to start with inflation. And we've called this the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good, well, inflation's coming down, and it's coming down quite aggressively. This is a 10-year chart. So if you look towards the right of that chart there, that's inflation coming down. It's coming down from that peak quite aggressively over the last, call it a year or so. The bad is that it's still too high. It's still higher than we want it to be. We're aiming for, and this is from the Bank of Canada themselves, they're aiming for 2% in a range of 1 to 3. It's sitting right now about 4. So it's still a little bit too high. And too high inflation means interest rates probably need to be a little bit high as well. And that creates all kinds of stresses and issues along the way. The ugly is kind of what we experienced over the last 2 years, with inflation really rocketing up over that period of time. Now, a lot of people in this room might say, well, that's not so ugly. I've seen ugly inflation in the 80s, and that was really ugly. But it is, for the first time in really 40 years, we're seeing some real material increases in inflation. And that, again, that's challenging. It's problematic in all kinds of ways, just for your day-to-day living, but also on the investment and financial side of things as well. So just to flesh this out a little bit with more recent numbers on inflation. Again, the good news is we've seen inflation coming down. These readings here at the top are showing you for July. So in July, inflation was about 3.3%. In August, just so you know, it was about 4%. What I wanted to highlight here is this bottom part. So mortgage interest up 30% year over year to the end of July. So anybody that has a mortgage out there that you know of, give them a hug. Maybe a kiss too. They really need the love right now because they're feeling it. If you take mortgage interest out of the inflation numbers, to the end of July, you had 2.4% inflation. So mortgage interest is actually the biggest contributor to inflation right now. Out of all the different things that are out there, food, yeah, it matters. Not as big as mortgage interest. So something just to think about. But again, you take that out, you take mortgage interest out, 2.4%. Remember, I said the range is 1 to 3%. So that's not too far off from where they want to be, where the Bank of Canada wants to be. Now, here's the dilemma. To stifle inflation, the Bank of Canada wants to increase interest rates. But as you increase interest rates, you really kill people on their mortgages. So they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. And the way that I've described this because the Bank of Canada, the only thing that they can do to really deal with the economy is to change interest rates. That's really the only mechanism they have at hand. So they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. And I've described this to our team as it's like there's a boiling pot of water, and the only thing that the Bank of Canada can do to bring that to room temperature quickly is to add ice to it. They're almost certainly going to get it wrong. They're not going to hit room temperature. They're either going to overshoot or undershoot. And we don't know exactly where it's going to land, but it's a bit what they call a blunt object. So again, another thing, we can't talk about the economy, finances, without talking about housing. Everybody here probably has some influence or dependence on housing and real estate in some way, shape, or form. This graph here is showing you the blue line there, which is the housing prices in Canada adjusted for inflation over, that's about a 30 plus year period of time. And the red line there is disposable income. These two things should track roughly in line with each other. As you can see, over the last 15 years, there's been a wide divergence where the price of housing has really exceeded the pace of income growth. I'm not saying there's a crash coming or anything like that, but that's potentially problematic. And if you look at lots of countries across the world, across many different time periods, you'll see these two things track roughly in line. So either there's going to be some massive increase in income, which I wouldn't count on, or maybe there's going to be another further dip in housing prices. And we've called this the catch me if you can. So if you look at Canada versus the US on the housing side of things, not that the US is a perfect predictor of what we should expect, but again, I'm going to highlight one portion of the graph here. The US housing market here, Canada here. So there's been a massive divergence in those two over the last 15 years. Now, as we know, there was a fairly significant recession that kind of centered around the US in 2008, starting in 2008. So we saw about a 5-year period of time, 5 years after that period of time, where the US house prices went down consistently over that 5-year period of time. It took about 12 years for US house prices to recover to where they were at 2007, around that time frame. So again, I'm not predicting a crash. We wouldn't predict a crash, but if you've owned real estate over the last 20 years, you've been extremely fortunate to see some of the gains that you have and the price appreciation that you have. I won't say that it's going to totally reverse, but I would say that you probably need to reset your expectations big time over the 10 years coming. It's not sustainable the way that it's been going. Just to give you a snapshot of markets over the last 5 years, so I showed you 2-month numbers on one of those first slides there. This is over the last 5 years to give you a bit of a broader perspective on things. So if I asked you 12 months ago, what were you thinking about markets and where the stock market would go? What were you thinking? I can tell you because I talked to a lot of you. Yeah, Sharon is going like that. 12 months ago was about the bottom in stock markets. And nobody thought stock markets would do well over the next 12 months. And lo and behold, next 12 months, they're doing pretty well, right? So again, that's not to say that after the dip that we've seen, we're just going to go up for the next 12 months. It doesn't always work like that. But if you ask me most of the time what our market's going to do over the next 12 months, I'll tell you probability is that they're going to be up. They're going to be higher than they are today. It's just the way that the math has worked over hundreds of years. I think importantly as well, I'll skip the 3-year number, but if you go to the 5-year number there at the bottom, we've had a lot of stuff thrown at us over the last 5 years. And what have markets done? Stock markets, they've done reasonably well. We've had 3 20% declines in stocks over that period of time. So in late 2018, there was a 20% decline in stocks. In 2020, as we all know, COVID, there was more than a 20% decline. It worked out to about 35%. And last year, with, let's call it the interest rate and inflation situation, stocks declined about 20% globally as well. And still, over the last 5 years, we've averaged almost 9% per year on the stock part of your portfolios, the global stocks. That's pretty good under any circumstances. So again, we'll take it. And you really got to roll with the punches when you invest in stocks, because you'll take a bit of a beating from time to time. Now, you could be looking at the bond number there, 0.4% over 5 years, and saying, I don't need to own any bonds then. That's the conclusion. Again, not quite. 5 years ago, again, I'll paint you a picture that interest rates were extremely low 5 years ago. That meant that the outlook for bonds was very underwhelming, let's call it. Today, interest rates a lot higher. Guess what? Your interest rates or your outlook for bonds looks a lot more attractive today as well. The other thing that's sort of lost on this as well is the bonds. They really do provide a lot of stability for your portfolio. Not everybody needs that stability, but a lot of people do. You need some stability in your portfolio. So even when returns don't look that attractive for bonds, we still want to have some allocation to bonds in your portfolios most of the time, for most people. So one flew over the cuckoo's nest. Yeah, this stuff will make you crazy. That's why I put this one up here, right? This stuff will drive you absolutely crazy if you're thinking about it all the time. And what I wanted to do is, let's look at monthly stocks over the last 20 years to see how often they're down from a prior peak. Because, and the reason I thought this was instructive is most people, when they're looking at their finances, they look at what the value is today or at the end of the month, and they compare it to last month, or they compare it to a previous time at some point in the past, like a year ago, and most of the time it's when my portfolio on January 13th was higher than it is today. And that was the highest. And I want to get back to that high. And obviously, understandably, we all know why you want to get back to that high. Over the last 20 years, there's been 240 months. So just thinking about this on a month-to-month basis, 70% of the time, so 7 out of 10 months, 160 of those months, you would have looked at your portfolio balance and said it was higher at a previous time. So most of the time, your portfolio is not at an all-time high. It's actually below where it was at some prior peak. And so what I've said is we live in a constant state of regret as investors and as business owners and as investors on your behalf. We live in a constant state of regret of could have, should have, would have done that. But it's damaging to try to think about that all the time. So not only are you down 70% of the time, but 40% of the time you're down more than 5% from a prior peak. And I just picked 5% as a number where most people would say, if I'm 5% higher than a previous peak, that's pretty significant for me. That's material, right? My $100,000 portfolio has lost 5%. My $500,000 portfolio, or $5,000, my $500,000 portfolio has lost $25,000. That's material for people. So 40% of the time, you would have looked at your statement balance at the end of the month and said, I was 5% higher at a previous time. Those guys should have sold, is what you're thinking. Those guys should have sold. I should be in cash, something like that, right? Now, if you just held stocks over that 20-year period of time, global stocks, you would have made a 400% return on your money. Your $100,000 would have been worth $500,000. Your $10,000 would have been worth $50,000. Your $1 million would have been worth $5 million if you just bought and held stocks over that entire 20-year period of time. That takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts and a lot of fortitude to be able to do that. So it comes to the topic of why diversify. And we always like to emphasize, why do we diversify? And this all comes down to the next slide here that our lovely marketing manager, Catherine, put in. Trailers, what's coming soon? Well, we don't know. We don't know. I had a client call me this morning and say, I'm going to the US in November, and I need to exchange some Canadian dollars for US. Do you know what's going to happen with the Canadian-US exchange? I have no idea. I said, flip a coin. Your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea what's going to happen over the next month with the Canadian-US exchange rate. So what we try to do is we try to diversify. We try to build a proper portfolio for you. I don't know what movie is going to come soon, but we're going to build you Netflix. And we're going to be able to stream whatever movie it is, whatever show is on there. We're going to give you a whole bunch of great things, great options to choose from. Because we know that over time, there's going to be some duds in there, but over time, it's going to be successful. It's going to be lucrative. It's going to grow. And we just don't know what's going to happen next. And a great example is we didn't know that 5,000 rockets were going to be fired across the Gaza Strip over the last 2 days, right? That was totally surprising for us. There is absolutely no possible way. If Israel didn't know, there's no way that we're going to know. And the other thing that we didn't know is the markets were going to be up the next 2 days after that happened. And that's true. That's exactly what's happened over the last 2 days. So the world is unpredictable. We don't try to predict something that we find unpredictable. What we try to do is build you a portfolio that is going to last no matter what happens. No matter what happens. Maybe I'll pause there and just see if there's any questions, and then I'm going to pass it off to Colin here to talk about Verecan. Yeah, Sharon. Yeah. 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 Judging from the age of a lot of people in the room here, most people would have an experience like that, right? The early 80s was that period of time. My dad said that he got a variable rate mortgage at 13% in the early 80s, thinking that there's no possible way it can go higher. And it went up to 20% in the next year. So yeah, those stories are all over the place. And that's why we try not to predict what's going to happen. I don't think interest rates are going to go anywhere near that this time around. But again, I wouldn't bet my life on it. I wouldn't bet your livelihoods on it. So
just try to remember that lesson. Try to remember that lesson, because that's the biggest mistake that we watch people make, is being really confident about what comes next. And the example of what's going on in Israel right now, I mean, even if I gave it to you, you were the one person who knew. Even though Israel didn't know, you knew it was about to happen. And you were right. What happens next is still unknown. Like, you don't know how things are going to react to it. So it's less exciting for us to stand up here and say, we don't know, because we're supposed to be the people who do it. And there's lots of people out there telling you they do know, but they're going to be wrong. It's best to understand what you can know and understand what you don't know.
More questions? Take it away.
Well, the perfect presentation. Thanks, Josh. All right, I've been put in charge of talking about our company's journey. Now, I have a basketball coach's voice, and I could turn it on full, but that's probably too much for the room, but I can also get soft. So I'm going to count on the people at the back to give me a hand if my voice starts to drift too low, please. All right, and don't be shy. I can turn it back on as quick as you put your hand up. So I've been tasked to explain to you Verecan. So I'd like to thank everybody in the room for renewing your vows with us, because I understand everybody in the room has, signed up with Verecan, and we do appreciate that. And that was how we looked at it. We went out to our clients and asked for everybody's trust to continue our relationship. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. What has happened, and I would explain it right from the basics. So there are 8 offices across Canada, 36 people. The whole team has all left IA Private Wealth and are all with Verecan. Everybody that was part of our group a year ago is a part of our group today. So that aspect of things hasn't changed. For those in the room who can remember back to Cartier Partners, Dundee Wealth, Hollis Wealth, I see some heads nodding up and down. Those were all against our will. Something got bought or sold. And you start to feel like a piece of meat after a while, as different institutes come in and they start passing you off from one institution to another. So every transaction up to this moment in time has been a corporate decision to buy or sell us, and therefore our clients, between one institution and another. One of the darkest moments in my personal history was when we were owned by Scotiabank. I'm not going to go too far into it. Josh is afraid. I'm going to go how dark that
You can laugh at that, but he's not joking.
If we do one of these in the evening, there's a beer on the table, I'll absolutely get into it for you. But what was different this time, and what was different than most other transactions, the vast majority of other transactions in the industry, is that we set up our own firm. The group that was WLWP set up our own firm. So instead of going to another corporation and making that the transaction, we decided that we're big enough and we've got enough smart people on the team that we're going to set up our own firm, which involved 2 years of work. And we went directly to the Securities Commission, the Ontario Securities Commission, and the Securities Commissions all across Canada, and put an application in to establish our own firm. Now, what's important about that was a huge investment on our part from our team. Blood, sweat, and tears went into this. And instead of, like every other transaction where we were being bought and sold, and there's a big check changing hands, we did not cash a check to make this change. We could have cashed a $5 million check and walked across the street to one of the other providers, Raymond James, Manulife, one of the major banks. But we decided that we wanted to break the cycle. We didn't want to be owned by a manufacturer. We didn't want to be working at cross purposes with our back office. Because when you're owned by an institution that manufactures product, there's always a meeting somewhere going on about how they can position themselves better to you. Even if we didn't listen to them, it was taking up bandwidth. It was a conversation that was constantly going on. We were working across purposes. So we decided we don't need that. We don't need to be working across purposes. We can sit in the room and do what we think is right with an organization put together to support that. So we set up our own firm.
That's what Verecan is.
Yes.
Just to be clear.
Verecan. Yes, You're right. I need to say Verecan more. Verecan. And as for the origins of Verecan, give them the honest version.
Of course.
Okay. It's a made up word because every word in the dictionary has been registered somewhere. So we got really, really frustrated and we made up a word. Best way to remember it, very Canadian. Verecan, very Canadian, which actually, oddly enough, kind of fits us. We really think we are very Canadian.
That's not how we came up with the name,
No, it's just how to remember. Right?
Yeah.
I left you alone. All right. Catherine was going to animate this, but she decided not to. But what I've basically given you is the story as to why we came up with what we came up. So we are registered directly with the Securities Commission. We are responsible to the Securities Commission, including the Ontario Securities Commission, for our daily working capital in our firm. We are very tightly regulated, more tightly than we were as advisors. So we are absolutely under the scrutiny of the regulators. The assets are secure. When we were with IA Private Wealth, they were using National Bank as a custodian. In the industry, a custodian is where your assets are actually held. That's where all the protections are. That's where all the tax reporting goes on. That's where all the trades are processed. So they were using National Bank as their custodian. We're using Fidelity Clearing Canada ULC. So Fidelity Clearing Canada is our custodian. So between Fidelity Clearing ULC and Fidelity Investment Management ULC, two Canadian subsidiaries, those two firms have assets under administration over $274 billion. They're not small outfits. Manulife deals with them. Richardson's deals with them. There's a lot of firms in Canada that use Fidelity. The reason that we chose Fidelity is they're part of a technology stack that we've employed to try to make our ability to serve you even stronger. One of the things we want to be is as efficient as we can. If I'm not spending 30% of my day doing administrative work, that's 30% more of my day I can spend in front of people like you talking about what's important. Part of this move was to try to get rid of some of those old antiquated systems and move to better systems. Now, there's going to be somebody in this room that challenges me. They're not perfect. We do have challenges everywhere we go. But the technology we're working with now is way better than what we've had in the past, and it's on its way to being even stronger. And we have not given up any protections that were in place before with regards to your accounts. So there's no more, you're not going to write a check to Verecan, all right? And I know there's people in this room are going to make a mistake because I've had it happen to me, not recently, in everybody's defense. They walk into the office with a check made out to me personally, and I go, no, I can't take that. You're going to be writing checks, and everything's going to be going through Fidelity Clearing Canada. The other thing we did, because we had control over it in designing our own firm, is we got rid of a lot of the conflicts that naturally exist in the Canadian financial system. One of the challenges, one of the conflicts that's built into the system is that it's very sales-based. Most often when you're talking to somebody, they have some kind of quota or incentive or part of the remuneration or a big chunk of the remuneration is tied to whether or not they can convince you to do something. Across our organization, there are no sales quotas. Nobody's working on a commission. None of that exists. We have 9 in our ownership group who all share in the net profits of the overall firm at the end of the year. But nobody you're going to be sitting across from is motivated because they have to sell 5 credit cards this week, or they need to get $5 million under management in order to save their job, or they need to sell an insurance policy to pay their mortgage this month. That does not exist within our group. So it was a further step we've been able to take as our own firm to remove something that is an inherent conflict in the system. What the Canadian financial industry has tried to do is leave these conflicts in place and then try to put rules in place to protect everybody with varying degrees of success. Every once in a while, you're going to see where somebody has gone sideways. Major institutions, minor institutions, and it's based on that fundamental conflict that's built into the system. I should add it, this is interactive. If somebody wants to challenge me on something, stick your hand up. I'll start to speak louder, and then I'll figure out it's a question and ask for the questions. This is Josh. I don't know what Catherine picked Josh for this quote, but our investment process is the foundation that supports our clients. All of my money is invested exactly the same as your accounts. In fact, all of our portfolio management group have their money invested in the same models that you guys are investing your money in. Different portions depending on risk, right? So that can be a thing. But the group that's putting together the investments for your portfolio are also investing in those same portfolios. We meet weekly to review anything that we feel to be newsworthy. And Josh heads up all of these meetings for us. He is the final arbiter of what's right and wrong. So we argue in front of Josh and he picks something. And he does a very, very good job at that. So our process remains exactly the same as it's been previously. And again, as an independent firm, we have access to anything that's publicly traded. So we don't have anybody in the background who's manufactured something that we are somehow being compelled or induced or having promoted to us. If we like something that's in the public realm, we can use it. The other thing that this has allowed us to do is expand the service offering to everybody. Because again, when we design our own firm, we can design it in such a way to codify some of the things that we think are important. So, for example, we have 4 members of the team now. 4, is that the right number? Thank you. Dylan's at the head of our mortgage group. So we have 4 members of our team who are actually licensed as mortgage brokers now. So for clients who are struggling, and this is very, very topical right now, are struggling with borrowing, we actually have the capacity within our group to put you in front of somebody who is a mortgage broker that, again, has access to the market, and we can provide that advice in concert with all the other advice that we're giving you. And why not, is the question. I was yelled at twice by clients because I didn't do mortgages. I don't like getting yelled at, so we investigated it, and we were able to roll it in as part of our offering through the Verecan group of companies. So again, it comes with very strict regulatory requirements that we're very, very aware of and we keep track of. But again, it's another service that we can put forward that right now is super important because a lot of people are dealing with mortgage issues. And typically when you're dealing with a mortgage issue, it's not a mortgage issue. It's a planning issue. And how you deal with mortgages affects how you deal with other priorities that you have.
Can I just interject for a second, Paul?
Please do.
So 2 years ago, I had a client come to me and say, can you refer me to a mortgage broker? We need to renew our mortgage. And I understand their financial situation very well. I referred them to a mortgage broker who we had done business with in the past, who we had built a level of trust with. And a couple weeks later, the client comes back to me and just said, hey, I just want to double check what this mortgage broker is recommending to me because it doesn't seem to be what you were talking about to us a couple weeks ago. The mortgage broker had suggested that they not only take out the amount that they needed to renew their mortgage, but take out an extra $400,000 and put it into their investment portfolio. So borrow to invest. So it was taking a $400,000 mortgage and turning it into an $800,000 mortgage. And I was almost sick when she told me this. And I said, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go back to this mortgage broker and tell them you're not interested. And you're going to go back to the bank and you're going to renew the mortgage as it was. That is why all these extra services, as we call them, exist. It's because we've experienced something from another professional out there that we think is totally wrong and incongruent with our clients' goals and expectations. And this couple and their young family would have been in a very tough situation today if they had taken out another $400,000 on their mortgage, lost 10%, and now had interest rates at 7.5% or wherever they'd be. So that's the stuff that makes our stomachs turn. And that's why we've tried to build the business that we have.
Thanks, Josh. There are lots of stories. I wasn't going to go too far in, but that's a good one. But again, it's something that lines up with everything else that we're doing for you. Once we understand your financial situation, we can add these additional things and keep you from putting yourself in a position where you're going to get substandard advice. Is that a good word? Terrible advice. Terrible advice. Okay.
Or predatory, I would even say.
Okay, easy now, big shooter. Tax preparation. So we also will do tax preparation for our clients. We don't run a tax preparation business. So if somebody's looking to get a tax return done, there's very little chance that we're going to be able to help them. But for our existing clients, we will do some basic T1, T2, even T3 tax prep work. Now we're going to take a look at it because we have a level of expertise that we're comfortable with. We have a couple of CPAs we bring in who work with us and other members of the team who are trained on tax preparation. But when we ran into the situation where we're doing all this tax planning for people with regards to their investments, we found, similarly to the world of mortgages, there's some really bad tax return work being done. And one of the founding partners, Daniel LeBlanc, my partner, the original partner in the group, always did tax returns. He's that guy. He looks after my tax return because he's so thorough in how he looks at things. We had many, many situations where clients have come to us where we find a mistake and we're able to reduce their overall tax burden. Now, because we have all the information, it's also much less likely that things are going to be missed, all right? And you will not get any aggressive tax planning from us. So if you come to me with my brother tells me that I can deduct this, no is the answer. We do not do anything aggressive. You do not want to get on CRA's Christmas card list because it's a difficult Christmas card list to get off of, all right? So you're not going to see any aggressive planning from us. But basic T1, T2 tax prep work, we will do that. And we put out a information circular, well, probably early next year on rates. Financial planning. So this is something that we're going to be rolling out as an additional separate standalone service at some point. The market in Canada really doesn't support that model yet, but we feel it is going to be the next thing. If I may for a second just kind of step back, our firm is based on the RIA model out of the US. As with many things, the US has been a little bit quicker to adopt a new way of doing business. So a very large percentage of the investment business in the US actually is run in an independent model, unlike Canada, where it's still controlled by major institutions like insurance and banks. So the financial planning, again, basic financial projections and a lot of planning work we do for our clients as part of the way we do things. But we are going to be able to expand that under the new realm and take on larger planning engagements and things of that nature. So we're going to be able to augment what we can do. Stay tuned for that one.
And just to be clear, anyone who's a client today gets full access to financial planning, whatever planning work we need to do for you.
So insurance is something else that we have been doing for a number of years now. I've been life insurance licensed since 1992. So within our group, we do insurance work. So this pairs back to the mortgages. So when you're doing a mortgage and you want to put life insurance on the mortgage, well, we can handle that separately and properly. So we actually have access to all the major Canadian insurance companies. And so when we're sitting down and working out what's important to you with regard to your estate plan and protecting your family, we have all this information already built up. We may have a completed plan. We may have some kind of projection. So in those situations, if there's a need for insurance, we can get a quote and we do a market survey of what's available in Canada and we'll bring something forward. Again, you're not going to see aggressive planning coming from us because there's some very, very aggressive insurance planning things out there that get overturned all the time. Having been around since 1992 doing this, I've watched a lot of things come and go. So our planning is going to be very, very guaranteed, very, very basic. It's not going to involve hugely overfunding or aggressive strategies or using insurance to back loans, things of that nature. That's outside the scope of what we're doing. We undo those plans all the time. We have many prospects and clients who walk into the office with these monstrous plans and we're going, why? And there's no good answer to that. Can we share the story? You don't want to share the story. We're not sharing the story. All right. So
ask me over beer. Another one of those.
All right. So I'll go back. Does anybody have any questions about this, or is this another perfect presentation? Wow. Oh, there we go. Yes. Travel insurance is part of it for sure.
Yeah.
We did a deep dive not that long ago. And thanks for bringing that up, Mary. We'll probably have to revisit it. But Manulife is where we did a lot of our travel insurance through because we did a side-by-side comparison of what's available in the marketplace. But every situation is different. Depends on age, duration of trip, pre-existing conditions. There's a lot that goes into it. And this is where we try to excel. When we know you, we can say, you're going to have a problem and this is the way you need to go. We can put a little bit of thought into where we direct you. But yes, travel insurance is something that's available from us. Now, we can't insure everybody all the time, but we can go to market. If it's available in the marketplace, we'll be able to bring it back to you.
It's life, disability, critical illness, and travel insurance would be the 4 buckets.
Long-term care.
Long-term care. Yeah. So not auto, not home. That's not the type of insurance that we're talking about.
Not yet.
Not yet. We never know. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Our team. So we have, and you're going to see it in print. So we've gone with a very specific look to all of our pictures and stuff, which that's pretty edgy or horror filmish. We have one member of our team, Catherine, who helps us design all of this kind of stuff. So I'm pretty impressed with it. She's pretty happy about it, but we can't take credit for any of these decisions. So there's Josh, who's acting as our chief investment officer. So he's, again, the guy who's making the final call on everything that we do. It's all your fault now, Josh.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You
so
can blame me.
Yeah, so Josh works out of the office here. Josh is Steve. I'm Colin. I live in Halifax. I spend time in BC, and Ontario's between BC and Nova Scotia. So, I stop on my way through and available for consultation depending on what's going on. Daniel LeBlanc, I say that because he's Acadian, so he goes by Dan to us English folks. And again, if you're running into a tax situation, you may end up talking with Dan at some point, or perhaps Claudio Opportunity. Leandra is brand new, and she said she had a great first week, so we're hoping to keep up the momentum there. Raj and Arlene keeping everybody together and on schedule. Thank you for all the work that you do. So here are the locations, the 8 locations across Canada. If you're ever traveling, we actually have had this happen where people drop into the Nelson office because they're in BC, and Nelson's a neat place to go. Feel free to drop in and introduce yourself to the team there.
If you do like hearing from Colin and I, we will trade barbs from time to time on a podcast that we record on. It was weekly. It's kind of fallen off a little bit, but we will get back to weekly recording. It's called Bare Naked Money. And the reason we called it that is because we want to be transparent and forthcoming. We don't actually take our clothes off, although we joke about it from time to time. So you can get it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. It's on our website if you want to listen to it there. I know Steve's got a 4-hour drive to Ottawa tomorrow, so he's going to download the last 10 episodes and listen to them on repeat.
Well, actually, and a bit of news is sometimes we bring in guests like Mitch is featured on a very recent episodes here, from different members of the team on different things, as well as we have special guests from time to time.
From time to time, yeah.
And if you have any ideas on something you want to hear us talk about, we take requests.
Yeah, absolutely. You know where to find us, so I won't cover that. Thank you so much again for coming out and spending time with us today. We really appreciate it.